Hey everyone, my name is George Crudo. I'm a digital sculptor, a well-renowned scientist, and a toy designer. I wanted to make a video to talk about some of the recent AI art drama, particularly involving Shadiversity, and I wanted to address a handful of specific comments he said from the perspective of an artist. And we're going to do this video while I'm working on some art in Zbrush. Now, before I get into this, I wanted to talk about how I see AI generative tools as a sort of black box, and everything that you input into it goes into this black box, and then a piece of art comes out of it, right? And I want you to think of what I'm doing today in ZBrush as what's happening inside of the black box as I explain my thoughts on these subjects. So first off, I know it's important for Shad to hear me answer this question so that we're on the same page about this. And the first question is, do I believe that AI-generated images are art? So my answer to that would be yes. However, I believe that the person providing the input is not the artist. I believe that the AI would be considered the artist. Now, let me explain that a little bit more. I think the best way to understand why I feel this way, even taking everything in Shad's workflow into account, is to consider the act of using an AI to be very similar to commissioning an artist. If you commission an artist, you typically reach out to them and tell them what you want. This would be your initial prompt. You may have a drawing of a character or a pose that you have in mind, and that would be your image-to-image input or your control net input. You might do drawovers and highlight specific parts of the image that you want the artist to change for you. I think you could argue that's in-painting. You may go through numerous rounds of revisions and back and forth and curating which versions of which piece that you want, and you go back and forth with the artist to get exactly what you want with extreme specificity. And despite all of this, you would never take a final commissioned work from an artist and throw it in your portfolio or claim that you were that it was representative of your skill in some way. That's just unheard of, and that's not how things go. So why would it be any different when you're using an AI? I like to consider that there are two different phases when you set out to make art. There is a concept and then the execution. When you're using AI, all of the execution takes place inside the black box, like you're seeing right now. When you're using an AI, you have no fine detail control over what happens in there. Versus what you're seeing right now is literally everything I'm doing is fine detail control to make a piece come to fruition. All of the things in Shad's workflow are things that people who hire artists do when they're communicating with the artists. I have received all sorts of things, including sketched poses, full character concepts, kit-bashed elements to get an idea across. Everything he has shown is all part of the conceptual phase that happens, and then all of the actual execution of the art is being done by the artists. They're the ones making all of the individual creative decisions in order to make the piece exist, and they are the ones with the skills. The artist is generating the work. I don't think it's controversial to say that AI-generated work is generated by an AI. It's literally in the name. So I think we really should stop taking credit for the AI's skill. Otherwise, when our AI overlords take over, people like Shad will be the first ones that it has a major grudge against. One counter to this that Shad and his friend had claimed is that 3D modeling and digital art software does all of the work for us. And how is AI even any different than that? Even funnier, his friend tried to compare technological improvements in stable diffusion, technological improvements in tablets. Like, I yell at my tablet and my 3D software all the time, and I can't get it to do a damn thing. This comparison is so incredibly wrong and silly to anybody that has used these softwares extensively. When you use a digital art software, you are making a crazy amount of individual creative decisions based on your developed skill and experience. And your artistic eye, which is something I know Shad understands, right? So you need all of that to realize a final work. Everything you're seeing on the screen right now, these are all thousands of creative decisions happening, and this is all taking place during the execution phase of an artwork. My software is not doing these things for me like an AI would. I have fine detail control over the execution phase of the artwork. This does not exist when using AI because all of the execution of the creation is taking place inside that black box, and you don't have access to that. You really are not in there with the AI deciding every individual stroke. And you can't really claim ownership if you're not that hands-on with the work. Even if it spits out a result and you do some minor edits over it, it's debatable if it's an accurate representation of your skill unless you heavily, heavily, heavily modify it to the point where it's almost indistinguishable from the output. Next, I want to get into some of the images that Shad has posted on Twitter, where he compares his original drawing to an AI rendition of it. He frequently posts these to try to make the point that the AI version looks better, and when a bunch of artists point out to him that they think the original looks better, he thinks we're being disingenuous, and he thinks that we're being obstinate against AI just for the hell of it. Before I get to Shad's work, I'm going to start with this example from Corridor Crew in their latest video. In the Corridor Crew video, they took a bunch of video game characters and ran it through an AI filter to make it look more realistic, and they were very amazed by all of these examples. I'm using this example of Solid Snake because a lot of people didn't understand why a lot of us believe that the original one looked better. So the problem that many artists will tell you is that this guy on the right is just not Solid Snake. Actually, the guy on the right is the guy you would see on a Halloween costume package for Solid Snake. He's a totally different guy. When I say that, I mean that the bandana is not correct. The hair detail, the strand that pokes off in the front is different. The entire facial structure and skin complexion and the overall vibe and sensibility of the character is not even remotely close. If I put these two side by side, I say the guy on the right is not Solid Snake. Many people will understand what I mean by that. But for people like Shad and Corridor Crew, a lot of other AI users, I think they get excited when they see something that's quote-unquote more realistic or quote-unquote more polished, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's better work. It's not necessarily always the goal. If your goal is to make Solid Snake, and you produce a guy that looks nothing like Solid Snake, but he's more realistic looking than the 3D model from 15, 20 years ago, you're not really achieving your goal. When people say the original looks better, we're highlighting that something got lost in the process. Something is missing from the AI-generated result that was there in the beginning. And a lot of AI users get excited about seeing the polished result while disregarding the important things that get left out. Two of the things I've heard Shad say while listening to him are that he likes to claim that he's a master of anatomy and proportions, and that he's one of the greatest AI art creators. Now, I'm not going to spend this time being too critical of Shad's actual artwork because I believe in encouraging people's actual artistic development, and we all start somewhere and we're all at different phases in our artistic journey. I do think, however, the idea that you're a master of anything or a self-proclaimed one of the greatest creators in an entire medium only prevents you from getting better and seeing your flaws. All of our work can always be improved, and most artists, including some of the best artists that I know, are rattled with insecurities about their work. Often the best artists are the ones who have the insecurities and see all of the flaws because that means they're improving. And a lot of the worst ones are the ones that have the overconfidence and believe that they're masters in their field. The reason why many of us will look at these two side-by-side comparisons of Shad's work and try to highlight why the original one is better is because we see the original character and we see the original intention behind the artwork, and that does not translate to the AI-generated version, aside from the basics of the pose, like the very basics of the pose. There's also a stylistic cohesion that exists because elements were not just kit bashed together at the end as a part of Shad's workflow, which he admits to. You can see that Shad drew things in very specific ways for these characters. A lot of the elements that Shad specifically spent time drawing and outlining as part of his execution of the creative process are totally overwritten in the final AI execution to be something completely different, and is clearly not part of what his original creative vision was. Shad may argue that it's his character and he knows what his character looks like, but it doesn't make a lot of sense that he would draw his character different than what he intended for it to look like in the end. Why did he draw this hairline like this? Or why did he draw the eyes spread apart like this? These are all questions I have that I don't understand when I see the final result. I also think when you look at some of these side by side, because the elements are kit bashed together and there seems to be a focus on realism, that it has a sort of uncanny effect when you look at it compared to the original artwork, that I think the idea that if he just spent more time on his original artwork, it would look way better than whatever this is. If you look at some of the other examples, this girl's hairline is drawn in a very specific way. She has details on her shirt and details on her skirt that are completely missing. The socks are missing. All of these details are completely missing from the AI realism version of it. Why? It doesn't seem like his vision is being captured. It seems like a rough approximation is being captured and upscaled to some generic sort of anime character. I want to know what the original version of this character would look like if Shad actually developed it further. I don't want to see an AI approximation of it. This is another example. The hair strand on the left is totally gone and replaced with just generic more hair. The helmet is totally different. Things like that are just things I don't understand. Like, if you drew it a specific way from the beginning, things are totally changed. So how is that representing your vision? And this last example too, Shad drew a specific hairstyle on this girl, and that hairstyle is not even remotely there. It's a completely different character. Just like with the solid snake example, it's like this girl has a specific hairstyle, she has specific eyebrows, she has a specific logo. He drew a specific logo for this character, and none of that is represented here. And I think there's just excitement about seeing a quote-unquote more polished result, but I think it just looks generic. It looks like when people say that AI art doesn't have soul, I think this is what people mean. Just having a more realistic or quote-unquote polished result doesn't mean that it's a better piece of work overall. There's a lot more soul in the original artwork, and there's a lot more potential in if he fleshed out his original ideas and improved his original traditional or digital skills versus using AI as a crutch to get him to a place that he's happier with his work. We all have to go through a phase where we're not happy with the work that we're doing and understand that it's not where we want it to be. This piece that I'm working on now is not anywhere close to where I want it to be. Like, it just doesn't look like it. And it's not going to be there for a while. It's going to take me a long time and a lot of creative decisions and execution to get there. And I think AI takes a lot of that process out that helps you grow. I do think one of the good points that was brought up in the debate is that it is basically like working out a muscle. And it's both the development of your artistic skill and the development of your artistic eye. You need to spend time at the art gym to work those muscles and get stronger at them. And if you use AI as a crutch instead of working those skills, you're going to atrophy, or you're not going to develop those skills at all. It could be a potential tool in your workflow. I do have an example of where I have used it in workflows before, but it's such a small, minor part of my workflow that I would never consider it to be an integral part to what I do, and I wouldn't want it to be because, frankly, I enjoy making the art, and I would rather do it myself because I don't find a lot of enjoyment or value in doing it with the AI. One of the last things I want to talk about is the idea that AI skills are vastly overinflated by people like Shad. There are currently a ton of people screaming at artists and telling them they need to learn AI and adapt into their workflows before they get left behind by other artists who are using AI. I think this is underestimating how technically competent artists are, and it reveals how technically amateur a lot of AI users are, that they think these workflows are difficult and challenging and that these tools are complicated. Look at the user interface for this software that I'm using. It's crazy, it's complicated, there's a cacophony of menus that open and close everywhere. I've written scripts for this software, and the scripting language is so archaic that the documentation for it is not even necessarily up to date, and I have to pray that I will find forum posts that explain how functions work. This is how complex an artist's workflow can be, and using an AI tool where you upload an image or you move a few sliders around or you draw a mask on it for inpainting is a toy compared to some of the tools that we use. If an artist had to learn AI, it would take them literally a day to figure it out compared to all of the other tools that they used. AI is essentially a toy in comparison to the tools that artists use on a regular basis, and they know extraordinarily well. I think it's kind of silly to encourage an emphasis on AI tools over learning artistic fundamentals and getting good at executing a piece of art. In the debate that Shad had, he made the argument that he doesn't believe or he doesn't know if AI is going to continue to improve to a point that makes his workflow obsolete. I think that's a lot of wishful thinking on Shad's part, that the AI is only going to improve to a point where his skill is valuable and then stop improving. A lot of people like to compare AI art to photography. And well, if we use that example, the early methods for taking photographs involved incredibly cumbersome equipment, highly toxic chemicals, and a lot of workflows that are unheard of today. They just don't exist anymore. All of the things that made taking a photograph difficult were not features. They were obstacles that got in the way of achieving what the ultimate goal of photography was, which was being able to take a photo. And that ultimately led to much more easy and accessible ways to do so. Nobody today, even including professional photographers, are using the methods and workflows that people were using when photography first came out. And now most people that take photos are pressing a button on their smartphone, and they don't even have to think about it. AI is essentially 90% of the way there, and that's really what the goal is. Anybody can use it and get an image off of DALL-E right now, and it can get you pretty close to what you want. And the entire premise of AI art is to be accessible, and the idea of a prompt needing to be complicated goes against the entire premise of the prompt delivering what you want from the AI. It's supposed to just give you what you type. That's the point. It's not supposed to be complicated. Prompt engineering isn't supposed to be part of it. All of that is going to be wiped away in as quickly as possible. It's almost a guarantee by the design that the goal of the tech is to give you exactly what you want when you ask for it. So I believe that's all I really wanted to get into today. And I do want to highlight that while I've been talking about all this stuff, I've been working on a piece of art, and it's not finished. And I just wanted to further emphasize to Shad, who believes that digital art software does all the work for you. I came into this software wanting to make a samurai character, and I had that concept, but the samurai character doesn't really exist yet, and it looks pretty bad right now. And it's going to take a lot more time with me in the execution phase, not the software, me in the execution phase, making it exist. So the idea that I'm relying on the software to do it for me is a very flawed way of looking at the situation, and I do think it's kind of disingenuous to compare that to AI, something that does actually execute most of the work for you. So hopefully when this guy is done, I'll have a nice little image I can share to show you what he looks like, so you can compare and contrast to what it looks like now. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this little talk we had here. It's an interesting topic, I think. I think it's fun to talk about. I am very perplexed by some of the things I hear on this topic, but it's still interesting to talk about nonetheless. And thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Have a good one.